Happy Friday, everybody! Happy Friday! Another day of the earth been turning. I hope everyone is staying safe. Thank you guys for anyone who's jumping on now versus earlier. Had to run some errands with the fam, but we're here now to round out the week with a little bit of war and peace. I know we're all wishing for more peace, but we got a little bit of war. Sometimes gotta fight through to get to the peacey part. So, and to that end, there's a bunch of things that we as citizens can do to support justice. Hey! The reason I'm running a few minutes late is because my brother was on. I was talking to him, and now he's going to watch our War and Peace. Isn't that great? Hi. To that end, I have the live chat up, so say hi. And if you have any good ideas or resources, they're about, yes, the PC part. Any good resources that can support Black Lives Matter or further ending police brutality and furthering the cause of social justice, feel free to drop it in the live chat. I'll have in the description when I post this video after it's done going live, I'll have a whole bunch of other links. There's lots of great videos you can watch, like fun movies or documentaries, just to feel a little more educated about racism in America. And you can also jump on here after this and jump on 8 Can't Wait. It's 8 things that have been proven to lower police violence in communities. And most communities still have these 8 things happening. So if we can ask our representatives to change how policing is done, we can make it less violent. So wherever you stand, I'm sure most people wouldn't want innocent people to be hurt. And so sometimes it's just a matter of saying, hey, the way we're doing things right now is dangerous. So let's work together and let's change some of the policies that are harmful. So jump on 8 Can't Wait. I know New York City still has 4 of the 8 things that are proven to increase violence. 4 of them are still in effect in New York. So jump on there and show your support to ending violence, because police violence isn't going to help police or minorities or white people or anybody in the society. It's not going to really make things better. So that's one thing you can do no matter where you stand. But also you can donate to Black Lives Matter, lots of other things. A friend of mine's got some t-shirts going that if you want to buy a t-shirt for the summer, you can do one, and the proceeds go to Black Lives Matter. I'll have that in the video afterwards. So, and to jump back to War and Peace, where were we? Pierre was getting initiated into the Freemasons. So that's exciting. Hey! Oh, so cool. My friend Rebecca is here all the way from Chicago. Mental health day off work. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sorry that you wanted to take the mental health day, but I'm glad you're taking it. That is important. And I'm so glad to see you here. You make my heart happy. So it's cool to see people that I care about. Carl, Rebecca, you guys remember each other, right? Thanks for jumping in on War and Peace. This is hopefully going to be a complete diversion from what else is going on in the world right now. But it's interesting because I've found that there's a lot of, the characters are very rich in the story, and there's a lot of resonances with the things that everyone struggles with, like the very human struggle that's happened throughout time. So right now we've been looking at the character Pierre. And Pierre was a bastard who, on his father's deathbed, after his death, was able to get recognized as the legitimate heir to his father. So he's like one of the wealthiest and most powerful men now in Moscow and Petersburg in Russia. And but he's got like kind of like very soft sort of character, and is very easily swayed and kind of easily gives into whatever he wants to do. So he had a duel with this guy Dolokhov, and even though Dolokhov didn't die, he feels bad about it. And he had the duel because he suspected that his wife and Dolokhov were having an affair. So, and where we ended was Pierre was getting inducted into the Freemasons, because the Freemasons said that, look, you're a man with all this advantages in your life. You should be using it to help people in the community. You should be using it to help your neighbor. You should be using it to help the people who are slaves and work on your property. And you're doing all of this, and instead of feeling fulfilled and looking to God to do better with what you have all of this wealth and all of this power, and you're doing nothing with it, and you're just feeling horrible about it. So he was like, yes, I am. So when we left him, he was in a super secret meeting and was starting to get inducted. So We're going to jump back in. Still him. Yeah, they talk about Freemasons, like, out of nowhere. We're, like, a quarter of the way into the book. And, like, in the last couple of sections, just out of nowhere, this Freemason character just shows up. Pierre's literally, like, riding between Moscow and Petersburg and is, like, stopped at this, like, posting station. And this dude just shows up who's, like, old and creepy and kind of, like, wise looking with, like, glittery eyes. And he's got, like, a ring that has, like a skull or something on it. And Pierre's like, oh, he's a Mason, you know? And then just out of nowhere, like, all of a sudden we're talking about Freemasons. So yes. And the Freemasons in this book appear to be, like, they're, you know, claiming to be this, like, super spiritual order and all that stuff. So yeah. And if you guys are jumping in for the first time, this book has been written in Russian with, like, French and Italian and German and, like, ton of other languages in it, so forgive me because I'm stumbling through some of the names, but also sometimes there's, like, random French words. And so for the most part, I read it as it is. If there's any big sections that are in a foreign language, I look for where the translation is and read the translation in English. But yeah, it's real diverse up in here. So let's go. We're on section 14. So we're in volume 2, part 2, section 4 of War and Peace. Soon after that, it was not the Rhetor who came into the dark temple for Pierre, but his sponsor, Wilarski, whom he recognized by his voice. To renewed questions about the firmness of intentions, Pierre replied, yes, I agree. And with a radiant, childish face, with his fat chest bared, walking unevenly and timidly with one shod foot and the other unshod, he went ahead with Wilarski, holding a sword to his bared chest. From the room he was led down corridors, turning back and forth, and finally led to the door of the lodge. Wilarski coughed. The response was a Masonic rapping of hammers, and the door opened before him. Someone's bass voice, Pierre was still blindfolded, asked him questions about who he was, where and when he was born, and so on. Then he was again led somewhere with his eyes still covered, and as he walked they told him allegories about the labors of his journey, about sacred friendship, about the pre-eternal architect of the world, about the journey, about the courage with which he must endure toils and dangers. During the journey, Pierre noticed that they referred to him now as the seeker, and now as the sufferer, and now as the postulate, and made various noises with hammers and swords. Just as he was brought to some sort of object, he noticed that there was perplexity and confusion among his guides. He heard the men around him arguing among themselves in whispers, and one of them insisting that he had to be led across some sort of rug. After that, they took his right hand, put it on something, and told him to hold a compass to his left breast with his left hand, and made him recite the oath of fidelity to the laws of the order, repeating words that someone else read. Then they put out the candles, lit a spirit lamp, as Pierre knew by the smell, and told him that he would see the lesser light. The blindfold was removed from his eyes, and Pierre saw, as in a dream, by the faint light of the spirit light, several men who stood facing him in the same aprons as the Rhetor, holding swords pointed to his breast. Among them stood a man in a bloody white shirt. Seeing them, Pierre moved his chest towards the swords, wishing them to pierce him. But the swords withdrew, and his eyes were covered again. Now you have seen the lesser light, someone's voice said to him. Then candles were lit again, and the voices said he must see the full light, and his eyes were uncovered again. And more than 10 voices suddenly said, Sic transit gloria mundi. Pierre gradually began, the translation of that is, thus passes the world's glory. Latin, see? It's crazy. Pierre gradually began to come to himself and looked again around the room he was in and the men who were in it. Some 12 men were sitting around a long table covered in black, all in the same attire as he had already seen. Pierre knew some of them from Petersburg society. In the chairman's place sat an unknown young man with a special cross on his neck. To his right sat the Italian abbé Pierre had seen 2 years before at Anna Pavlova's. There was a rather important dignitary and a Swiss tutor who formerly lived with the Korrigans. They were all solemnly silent, listening to the words of the chairman, who was holding a hammer in his hand. The wall had a burning star emblazoned on it, and on one side of the table was a small rug with various images. On the other was something like an altar with a gospel book and a skull. Around the table stood 7 large candlestands, as in a church. 2 of the brothers led Pierre to the altar, placing his feet at right angles, and ordered him to lie down, saying that he now prostrates himself at the gates of the temple. He should receive the trowel first, one of the brothers said in a whisper. Ah, enough, I beg you, said another. Pierre looked around perplexedly with his nearsighted eyes not obeying, and doubt suddenly came over him. Where am I? What am I doing? Aren't they laughing at me? Won't I be ashamed to remember it? But this doubt lasted only a moment. Pierre looked at the serious faces of the people around him, remembered all he had already gone through, and realized that he could not stop halfway. He was horrified at his doubt, and trying to recall his former tender feeling, he prostrated himself at the gates of the temple. And indeed a tender feeling, still stronger than before, came over him. After he had lain there for some time, they told him to get up and put on a white leather apron such as the others were wearing, handed him a trowel and 3 pairs of gloves, and then the Grand Master addressed him. He told him to try not to stain in any way the whiteness of his apron, which represented strength and blamelessness. Then of the unexplained trowel, he told him to work with it to purify his heart of vice, and tolerantly smooth over the heart of his neighbor. Then of the first pair of men's gloves, he said to Pierre, he could not know their meaning, but had to keep them. Of the second pair of men's gloves, he said he had to wear them at meetings. And finally, of the third pair, which were women's gloves, he said, My gentle brother, these women's gloves are destined for you as well. Give them to the woman whom you honor most of all. By this gift you will give assurance of the blamelessness of your heart to the one whom you elect as your worthy lady Mason. After a pause, he added, But preserve these gloves, gentle brother, that they not adorn unclean hands. Just as the Grand Master pronounced these last words, it seemed to Pierre that the chairman became embarrassed. Pierre became still more embarrassed, blushed to the point of tears, as children do, and started looking around uneasily, and an awkward silence ensued. Oh, hi, Mom! This silence was broken by one of the brothers, who, leading Pierre to the rug, began reading to him from a notebook the explanation of all the images depicted on it. The sun, the moon, a hammer, a plumb line, a trowel, a rough stone and a squared stone, a pillar, 3 windows, and so on. Then Pierre was assigned his place, shown the signs of the lodge, told the password, and finally allowed to sit down. The Grand Master began to read the rules. The rules were very long, and Pierre, from joy and excitement and abashedness, was unable to understand what was being read to him. He heard well only the last words of the rules, which stayed in his memory. In our temple we know no other distinctions, the Grand Master read, than those between virtue and vice. Beware of making any distinction that may violate equality. Fly to aid your brother, whoever he may be. Instruct him who errs, raise up the fallen, and never nurse any malice or enmity against your brother. Be gentle and affable. Arouse the fire of virtue in all hearts. Share your happiness with your neighbor, and never let envy cloud this pure delight. Forgive your enemy. Take no revenge on him, unless it be by doing him good. Having thus fulfilled the higher law, you will recover the traces of the ancient majesty you have lost, he concluded, and standing up, he embraced Pierre and kissed him. Pierre looked around with tears in his eyes, not knowing how to reply to the congratulations and renewals of acquaintance that surrounded him. He did not recognize any acquaintances. In all these people he saw only brothers, and he burned with impatience to start working with them. The Grand Master rapped with his hammer. Everyone sat down in their places, and one brother read a sermon about the necessity of humility. The Grand Master suggested that they fulfill the last duty, and the important dignitary, who bore the title of alms collector, started making the round of the brothers. Pierre wanted to write down all the money he had on the list of alms, but was afraid of showing pride and wrote down the same amount as the others did. The meeting was over, and on his return home it seemed to Pierre that he had come back from some distant journey, where he had spent dozens of years, had changed completely, and had detached himself from the former order and habits of his life. Section 5. The day after his reception into the lodge, Pierre was sitting at home, reading a book and trying to make out the meaning of a square, one side of which represented God, the other the moral, the third the physical, and the fourth their mixture. From time to time he tore himself away from the book and the square, and in his imagination put together a new plan of life for himself. The day before he had been told in the lodge that the rumor of his duel had reached the sovereign, and that it would be sensible for Pierre to leave Petersburg. Pierre planned to go to his southern estates and occupy himself with his peasants. He was joyfully contemplating this new life when Prince Vasily unexpectedly came into the room. "My friend, what have you done in Moscow? Why did you quarrel with Leia, mon cher? You are mistaken," said Prince Vasily as he came in. "I found out everything and can tell you for certain that Helene is as innocent before you as Christ before the Jews." Pierre was about to reply, but he interrupted him. "And why didn't you turn to me directly and simply as a friend? I know it all. I understand it all," he said. "You behaved as befits a man who cherishes his honor. Perhaps too hastily, but we won't discuss that. Only understand in what position you have placed her and myself in the eyes of the whole of society and even of the court," he added, lowering his voice. "She's living in Moscow, you hear. Come, my dear." He pulled his hand downward. "This is nothing but a misunderstanding. I think you feel that yourself. Let's write her a letter right now and she'll come here. Everything will be explained and all this talk will end, or else, I tell you, you may very well suffer for it, my dear." Prince Vasily looked imposingly at Pierre. I have it from good sources that the Dowager Empress is taking a lively interest in this whole affair. You know she's very favorable to Helene." Pierre was on the point of speaking several times, but on the one hand, Prince Vasily would not let him, hastily cutting off all conversations, and on the other hand, Pierre himself was afraid he might not be speaking in the tone of resolute refusal and disagreement in which he was firmly resolved to answer his father-in-law. Besides, the words of the Masonic rule, "Be gentle and affable," came to his mind. He winced, blushed, rose up, sank back, working on himself in what was for him the most difficult thing in life. To say something unpleasant to a person's face, to say something to that person, whoever he may be, was not expecting. He was so used to obeying Prince Vasily's tone of casual self-assurance that this time, too, he felt he would be unable to oppose it, yet he felt that his whole future destiny would depend on what he said right now. Whether he would follow the old former way, or the new one which had been shown to him so attractively by the Masons, and on which he firmly believed he would find rebirth into a new life. "Well, my dear," Prince Vasily said jokingly, "say yes to me and I'll write to her myself and we can kill the fatted calf." But Prince Vasily had no time to finish the joke, because Pierre, with a fury in his face that was reminiscent of his father, without looking his interlocutor in the eye, said in a quiet whisper, "Prince, I did not invite you here. Go, please, go." He jumped up and opened the door for him. "Go now," he repeated, not believing himself and glad of the expression of embarrassment and fear that appeared on Prince Vasily's face. "What's the matter with you? Are you ill?" "Go," the menacing voice said once more, and Prince Vasily was forced to leave without receiving any explanation. A week later, having said goodbye to his new Mason friends, and having left them rather large sums for alms, Pierre was off to his estates. His new brothers gave him letters to the Masons of Kiev and Odessa, and promised to write to him and guide him in his new activity. Section 6. The affair between Pierre and Dólokhov was hushed up, and despite the sovereign's severity concerning duels, neither the two adversaries nor their seconds suffered. But the story of the duel, confirmed by Pierre's separation from his wife, spread in society. Pierre, who had been viewed indulgently, patronizingly, when he was an illegitimate son, who had been coddled and made much of when he was the best suitor in the Russian Empire, had lost much in the opinion of society after his marriage, when brides and mothers had nothing to expect from him, the more so as he neither could nor would seek its favor. Now he alone was blamed for what had happened. It was said that he was a jealous dunderhead, subject to the same fits of bloodthirsty rage as his father. And when Helene returned to Petersburg after Pierre's departure, she was received by all her acquaintances, not only cordially, but with a shade of deference in view of her misfortunes. When talk turned to her husband, Helene assumed a dignified expression, which she, though without understanding its significance, adopted with her very own special tact. This expression meant that she was resolved to endure her misfortune without complaining, and that her husband was a cross sent to her by God. Prince Vasily voiced his opinion with more candor. He would shrug his shoulders when talk turned to Pierre and say, tapping his forehead, "On ce vieux fêlé, je le déteste toujours." "I said it first thing," Anna Pavlovna said of Pierre. "I said it once then, and before everyone else," she insisted on her priority, "that he is a crazy young man, despoiled by the depraved ideas of our time. I said it back when everyone admired him, and he had just come from abroad, and remember, played some sort of marat at one of my soirees, and how did it end? Even then, I didn't want this marriage, and predicted everything that's happened. As before, Anna Pavlovna, on free evenings, held soirees at her home, such as she alone had the gift to organize. Evenings at which, first of all, there gathered la crème de la véritable bonne society, la fine fleur de l'essence intellectuelle de la société de Petersburg, as Anna Pavlovna herself put it. Besides this refined selection of society, Anna Pavlovna's soirees were also distinguished in that, at each soiree, Anna Pavlovna served up for her guests some new, interesting person, and that nowhere as at these soirees did the level of the political thermometer indicate the mood of legitimist Petersburg court society so clearly and firmly. At the end of 1806, when all the sad details had been received of Napoleon's destruction of the Prussian army at Jena and Osterdaat, and the surrender of most of the Prussian fortresses, when our army had already entered Prussia and our second war with Napoleon had begun, Anna Pavlovna gathered a soiree in her home. La crème de la véritable bonne society consisted of the enchanting and unfortunate Helene, abandoned by her husband, of Montmartre, of the enchanting Prince Hippolyte, just come from Vienna, two diplomats, the aunt, a young man who in this drawing room simply bore the title of un homme de beaucoup de mérite, a newly appointed lady-in-waiting with her mother, and some other less conspicuous persons. The person to whom Anna Pavlovna treated her guests as a novelty that evening was Boris Drubetskoy, who had just come as a courier from the Prussian army, where he was an adjutant attached to a very important person. The level of the political thermometer showed to the company that evening was the following. However hard all European sovereigns and military leaders try to pander to Bonapartists in order to cause me, and us in general, unpleasantness and grief, our opinion of Bonapartists cannot change. We will not cease to voice our unfeigned way of thinking on that account, and we can only say to the Prussian king and others, so much the worse for you. Tous l'avons voulu, Georges Dandin. That's all we can say. And that was the political thermometer indicated at Anna Pavlovna's soiree. When Boris, who was to be served up to the guests, entered the drawing room, nearly the entire company had gathered in the conversation, guided by Anna Pavlovna, had to do with our diplomatic relations with Austria and the hope of alliance with her. Boris, in a dashing adjutant's uniform, matured, fresh, and red-cheeked, walked freely into the drawing room and was duly taken to greet the aunt, and then reattached to the general circle. Anna Pavlovna gave him her dry hand to kiss, introduced him to some strangers, and whispered her definitions of them to him. Le Prince Hippolyte Kroegin, charmant jeune homme. Monsieur Krog, charge de l'affaires de Copenhague, un esprit profound, and simply, Monsieur Sitov, un homme de beaucoup de mérite, of the one who bore that title. Boris, during the time of his service, thanks to the efforts of Anna Mikhailovna, his own tastes, and the qualities of his reserved character, had managed to put himself in a most advantageous position in the service. He was an adjutant to a very important person, had a very important mission in Prussia, and had just returned from there as a courier. He had fully adopted the unwritten subordination he had liked so much in Olmutz, according to which an ensign could have become incomparably higher standing than a general, and according to which, for success in the service, one needed not efforts, not labors, not courage, not perseverance, but only skill in dealing with those who gave rewards for service. And he was often surprised at his quick success and how others could fail to understand it. Thanks to this discovery, his whole way of life, all his relations with former acquaintances, and all his plans for the future had changed completely. He was not rich, but he spent his last penny to dress better than others. He would sooner deprive himself of many pleasures than allow himself to drive in a shabby carriage or appear in an old uniform in the streets of Petersburg. He made friends and sought acquaintances only with people who were above him and therefore could be of use to him. He loved Petersburg and despised Moscow. The memory of the Rostovs' home and his childhood love for Natasha was disagreeable to him, and he had never once visited the Rostovs since joining the army. He considered his presence in Anna Pavlovna's drawing room as an important promotion in the service, and he now understood at once his role there and left it to Anna Pavlovna to exploit the interest contained in him, while studying every person attentively and evaluating the advantages and possibilities of making friends with each of them. He sat down in the place shown him by the beautiful Hélène and listened to the general conversation. Vien trouve le best du trait propose tellement hors de l'atteinte qu'on ne saurait le parvenir même par une continuité de succès de la plus brillance, et elle met doute les moyens que pourront nous les procure. C'est la phrase authentique du cabinet de Vienne, the Danish charge des affaires was saying. C'est le doute que est flatteur, said le homme à l'esprit profonde, with a subtle smile. Il fait distinguer entre le cabinet de Vienne et l'empereur d'Autriche, said Mortemart. L'empereur d'Autriche n'a jamais pu penser une chose pareille, ce n'est le cabinet qu'elle le dit. Eh, mon cher vicomte, Anna Pavlovna mixed in, l'Europe. For some reason, she pronounced it l'Europe, as if for some special subtlety of the French language, she could allow herself when speaking with a Frenchman. L'Europe ne sera jamais notre ally sincère. After which, Anna Pavlovna led the conversation towards the courage and firmness of the Prussian king in order to bring Boris into things. Boris listened attentively to what was being said, waiting for his turn, but at the same time he managed to glance several times at his neighbor, the beautiful Hélène, who several times met the eyes of the handsome young adjutant with a smile. Quite naturally, in speaking of the position of Prussia, Anna Pavlovna asked Boris to tell them about his trip to Glogau and the situation in which he found the Prussian army. Boris, unhurriedly, in pure and correct French, told quite a few interesting details about the army and the court, taking care all through his account to avoid stating his own opinion concerning the facts he conveyed. For some time, Boris commanded general attention, and Anna Pavlovna felt that the novelty she had treated them to was received with pleasure by all the guests. Hélène paid the most attention to all of Boris's story. She asked him several times about certain details of his trip, and seemed to be very interested in the position of the Prussian army. As soon as he finished, she turned to him with her usual smile. Il fait absolument que vous veniez me voir, she said to him in a tone implying that, for certain considerations which he could not know, this was an absolute necessity. Mardi entre les 8 et 9 heures. Vous me ferez grand plaisir. Boris promised to fulfill her last wish and was about to get into conversation with her when Anna Pavlovna called him away on the pretext that her aunt wanted to hear him. Do you know her husband? Said Anna Pavlovna, closing her eyes and pointing to Hélène with a sad gesture. Ah, she's such an unhappy and lovely woman. Don't speak of him in her presence. Please don't speak of him. It's too painful for her. Section 7. When Boris and Anna Pavlovna returned to the general circle, the conversation there had been taken over by Prince Hippolyte. Leaning forward in his armchair, he said, Le Roi de Prusse, and having said it, he began to laugh. Everyone turned to him. Le Roi de Prusse, Hippolyte asked, laughed again and again calmly and seriously sat back in the depths of his armchair. Anna Pavlovna waited a little, but as it seemed that Hippolyte decidedly had no intention of saying more, she began to tell about how the godless Bonaparte purloined the sword of the Frederick the Great in Potsdam. C'est l'épée de Frederick le Grand que she began, but Hippolyte interrupted her with the words, Le Roi de Prusse. And again, as soon as they turned to him, he apologized and fell silent. Anna Pavlovna winced. Mortemart, Hippolyte's friend, asked him resolutely, Voyons à que en avez-vous avec votre Roi de Prusse? Hippolyte laughed, as if he was ashamed of his own laughter. Non, ce n'est rien. Je voulais dire seulement. He intended to repeat a joke that he'd heard in Vienna and that he had been trying to put in all that evening. Je voulais dire seulement que nous avons tous de l'effet de la guerre pour le Roi de Prusse. Boris smiled cautiously, so that his smile could not be understood either as mockery or as approval of the joke, depending on how it was received. Everyone laughed. Il est très mauvais, votre jeu de mots très spirituel, mais injuste, said Anna Pavlovna, shaking her shriveled finger. Nous se faisons pas la guerre pour le Roi de Prusse, mais pour les bons principes. Ah, les méchants, c'est Prince Hippolyte, she said. um, he wanted to say something that I only wanted to say that we are wrong to make war for the King of Prussia. And she said that you play at words very bad, very witty, but unfair, and we are not making war for the King of Prussia, but for good principles. Ah, that wicked principlet. The conversation did not flag all evening, turning mostly around political news. At the end of the evening, it became especially lively when things got around to the rewards bestowed by the sovereign. Last year, N.N. received a snuff box with a portrait, said L'homme à l'esprit profond. Why shouldn't S.S. receive the same reward? Je vous demande pardon. Une tabatière avec le portrait de l'empereur est une récompense, mais pas une distinction, said the diplomat. Un cadeau plutôt. Il y a eu plutôt des antécédents, je vous citerai Schwarzberg. C'est impossible, another objected to him. Let's bet on it. Le grand cordon, c'est différent. When they all got up to leave, Helene, who had spoken little all evening, again turned to Boris with the request and the gentle, meaningful order that he visit her on Tuesday. It's very necessary for me, she said with a smile, glancing at Anna Pavlovna, and Anna Pavlovna, with the same sad smile that accompanied her words when her exalted patroness was mentioned, seconded Helene's wish. It seemed as though, from certain words that Boris had spoken that evening about the Prussian troops, Helene had suddenly discovered the necessity of seeing him. It was as if she were promising him that, when he came on Tuesday, she would explain the necessity to him. Having come on Tuesday evening to Helene's magnificent salon, Boris was not given a clear explanation of why it had been necessary for him to come. There were other guests. The Countess spoke little to them, and only as he kissed her hand, on taking his leave, did she, with a strange absence of a smile, unexpectedly, in a whisper, say to him, Venez demain dîner, le soir, il faut que vous venez. Come to dinner tomorrow, in the evening. You must come. Do come. During his stay in Petersburg, Boris became an intimate of Countess Bezukhov's home. I smell trouble in River City. Section 8. The war was heating up, and its theater was approaching the borders of Russia. Everywhere curses were heard on the enemy of the human race, Bonapartists. Militia and recruits were being gathered from the villages, and divergent news kept coming from the theater of the war, false as usual and therefore reinterpreted in various ways. The life of old Prince Bolkonsky, Prince Andrei, and Princess Maria had changed much since 1805. In 1806, the old prince was made of one of the 8 commanders-in-chief of the militia that was then appointed all over Russia. The old prince, despite the weakness of age, which had become especially noticeable during the time when he counted his son as killed, did not believe he had the right to refuse the function assigned to him by the sovereign himself, and this activity newly opened up for him roused and strengthened him. He traveled continually around the 3 provinces entrusted to him. He was thorough to the point of pedantry in his duties, strict to the point of cruelty with his subordinates, and personally entered into the minutest detail of things. Princess Maria now stopped taking lessons in mathematics from her father, and merely went to her father's study in the mornings, whenever he was at home, accompanied by the wet nurse and the little prince, Nikolai, as his grandfather called him. The nursing Prince Nikolai lived with his wet nurse and the nanny, Savishna, in the rooms of the late princess, and Princess Maria spent the greater part of the day in the nursery, replacing her little nephew's mother as well as she could. Mademoiselle Bourrienne also seemed to love the boy passionately, and Princess Maria, often depriving herself, yielded to her friend the pleasure of dandling the little angel, as she called her nephew, and playing with him. Near the altar of the church at Bald Hills there was a chapel over the grave of the little princess, and in the chapel had been placed a marble memorial, brought from Italy in the form of an angel with spread wings, ready to soar into the sky. The angel had a slightly raised upper lip, as if he was about to smile, and once, as they were leaving the chapel, Prince Andrei and Princess Maria confessed to each other that the angel's face strangely reminded them of the face of the deceased woman. But stranger still was something that Prince Andrei did not tell his sister, which was that in the expression which the artist had chanced to give the angel's face, Prince Andrei read the same words of the meek reproach he had once read on his dead wife's face. "Ah, why have you done this to me?" Soon after Prince Andrei's return, the old prince separated his son's share of the inheritance and gave him Bogucharovo, a large estate 30 miles from Bald Hills, partly on account of the painful memories connected with Bald Hills, partly because Prince Andrei did not always feel able to bear calmly with his father's character, and partly because of his need for solitude. Prince Andrei took advantage of Bogucharovo, began building, and spent much of his time there. After the Austerlitz campaign, Prince Andrei had firmly decided never to serve in the army again, and when war began and everyone had to serve, he took a post raising militia under his father's leadership in order to get out of active service. It was as if, under the campaign of 1805, the old prince and his son had exchanged roles. The old prince, roused by his activity, expected nothing but good from the present campaign. Prince Andrei, on the contrary, not taking part in the war, regretting it deep in his heart, saw nothing but bad. On the 26th of February, 1807, the old prince left on his rounds. Prince Andrei stayed at Bald Hills, as he did most often during his father's absence. Little Nikolushka had been ill for 3 days now. The coachman who drove the old prince came back from town bringing papers and letters for Prince Andrei. The valet with the letters did not find the young prince in his study and went to Princess Maria's side, but he was not there either. The valet was told that the prince had gone to the nursery. "If you please, Your Excellency, Petrushka has come with papers," said one of the maids who assisted the nanny, addressing Prince Andrei, who was sitting on the child's little chair, frowning, his hands trembling, pouring drops of medicine from a vial into a glass half filled with water. "What's that?" he said crossly. His hands carelessly twitched, pouring an extra number of drops from the vial into the glass. He dumped the medicine on the floor and asked for more water. The maid gave it to him. In the room stood a baby's crib, 2 trunks, 2 armchairs, a table, and a child's table with the little chair on which Prince Andrei was sitting. The curtains were drawn, and a candle burned on the table, screened by a bound music book to shield the bed from the light. "My friend," said Princess Maria, addressing her brother from beside the crib where she was standing, "it's better to wait. Later. Ah, for pity's sake, you keep saying stupid things and you keep wanting to wait. See, we've waited," said Prince Andrei in a spiteful whisper, clearly with the wish to sting his sister. "My friend, really, it's better not to wake him. He's asleep," the princess said in a pleading voice. Prince Andrei got up and, holding the glass, tiptoed towards the crib. "You really think we shouldn't wake him?" he said hesitantly. "As you wish. Really, I think, but as you wish," said Princess Maria, clearly abashed and ashamed that her opinion had triumphed. She pointed to the maid who was calling to her brother in a whisper. It was the second night that the two of them had not slept, looking after the boy who was burning with fever. For 2 whole days, not trusting their house doctor and expecting the one they had sent for from town, they had been trying now one, now another remedy. Worn out by sleeplessness and anxiety, they shifted their grief onto each other, reproached each other, and quarreled. "Petrushka's here with papers from your father," the girl whispered. Prince Andrei stepped out. "Well, what now?" he said crossly, and having listened to the verbal orders from his father and taken the envelopes and his father's letter, he went back to the nursery. "Well, how is he?" asked Prince Andrei. "Still the same. Just wait, for God's sake." "Karl Ivanitch always says that sleep is the best of all," Princess Maria whispered with a sigh. Prince Andrei went over to the baby and felt him. He was burning. "Devil take you and your Karl Ivanitch." He picked up the glass with the drops of medicine in it and went back again. "Andrei, don't," said Princess Maria. But he glowered at her angrily and at the same time sufferingly and bent over the baby with the glass. "But I want it," he said. "Well, give it to him, I beg you." Princess Maria shrugged her shoulders, but took the glass obediently, and calling to the nanny, began to administer the medicine. The baby cried and wheezed. Prince Andrei, wincing, clutched his head, went out, and sat on the sofa in the next room. He still had the letters in his hand. He opened them mechanically and began to read. On blue paper in his large, elongated hand, occasionally using abbreviations, the old prince wrote the following. "I have this moment received most joyful news through a courier. If it is not a lie, Bennigsen is supposed to have won a full victory over Bonapartists at the Preussische Eylau. In Petersburg there is a general rejoicing, and no end of rewards have been sent to the army. Though he is German, I congratulate him. The commander is Korchevko, a certain Chandrikov, is doing something I cannot fathom. Up to now, additional men and provisions have not been delivered. Gallop there at once and tell him that his head will roll unless everything is done within a week. I have also received a letter about the Battle of Prusich-Eylau from Petenka, who took part in it. Everything is true. When those who should not interfere do not interfere, even a German can beat Bonapartius. They say he is fleeing in great disarray. See that you gallop to Korchevka without delay and carry out my orders. Prince Andrei sighed and opened another envelope. This was a 2-page, closely written letter from Bilibin. He folded it without reading it and read his father's letter again, ending with the words, "Gallop to Korchevo and carry out my orders." No, excuse me, I won't go now. Not until the baby gets well, he thought. And going to the door, he peeked into the nursery. Princess Maria was still standing by the crib, gently rocking the baby. Yes, what's that other unpleasantness he writes? Prince Andrei recalled the contents of his father's letter. Yes, our side has won a victory over Bonaparte precisely when I'm not serving. Yes, he keeps making fun of me. Well, he's welcome to. And he began to read Bilibin's letter, written in French. He read, not understanding half of it, read only so as to stop thinking for at least a minute about what he had been thinking of exclusively and painfully for all too long. And I believe we will stop there on the cliffhanger right before Bilibin's note. As some of you may remember, Bilibin is his friend who is a rather self-satisfied diplomat. I was going to say Democrat. Diplomat who has served in the Austrian courts. And he's always coming up with these witty sayings of himself that he passes around. But he is also an intelligent man who is a diplomat and works closely in the Austrian court for the Russian court. So it will be interesting to see what he says about things happening, because surely he is close to the Austrian emperor and will know what's happening on the front. So, but as I said, we will have to hold off there for now. Quite a bit of scandal going on. So poor Prince Andrei, he's just tormented. His wife died after giving birth to their son. And he was presumed dead after this battle with Bonaparte. And he was one of these guys who had all these high ambitions of what he would make of himself in the military and his military prowess and then he fell in battle and he just thought, you know what, it all seems so pointless, basically. And so, yeah, scandal. Everyone's making Helen out to be this poor thing, and not sure how I feel about that. Tolstoy handles her always kind of obliquely. He never gives us sort of first person accounts of her. It's always very third person of she appears this way. There was this said about her. At one point, Pierre thought there was a rumor about her being in love with her own brother. So that's kind of weird. Did she actually cheat on him? Did she not? Evidently, it seems like she disdains him a lot, she disdains her husband Pierre anyways, before all this even took place, so not sure. And yeah, it looks like she's gonna sidle up to young Boris. And I thought it was really interesting, something that Boris had said. Oh, and it appears Pierre is really joining the Masons for earnest, and I'm glad he actually finally stood up to Prince Vasily, because Prince Vasily is a master manipulator. I think the only reason he married Helen is because Vasily weaseled it around, and that was after he tried to weasel him out of his inheritance. So Prince Vasily is a bit of a snake in the grass. But I thought it was very interesting, something about what Boris had discovered. It's something he had referenced to earlier, the fact that how an ensign, a lower soldier, could have incomparably higher standard than a general, who should by all accounts be higher to him, based on this sort of unwritten subordination. And I think it's really interesting, especially everything that's going on in the world right now, and how people talk about how things are, Ensign. Yes, I knew I was saying it wrong, and every time I said it, it didn't sound right in my head. Thanks, Mom. My English tutor here. Ensign. But everything going on, no matter what things are written as to say, what the hierarchy is written to say, that everyone has these rights or that this person is in charge of this person, there's always how personal bias changes things. And so he discovered this when he was meeting with Prince Andrei, who was this adjutant to an important general. And this other general was trying to relay a message to the general through Prince Andrei. And Prince Andrei was just bored with the man, didn't have a lot of respect for him. And so when he saw Boris come in, who was a friend, even though he's a much younger rank, he put off the other general so he could treat his friend with more respect. And that's in that moment, Boris realized, I almost have more power than this general, even though I'm lower than all of these people here. And it's how this perceived subordination and perceived value can trump what people's actual value or position is. I think it's really interesting and something that we should all consider. Wish more people would consider that, because a lot of times people want to look at things at face value and just say that's the value. But that's not how we operate as humans. We have our own hierarchy in our head, no matter what's written down. So those are my thoughts for today. Thank you for everyone who joined. My grandpa was even listening in, and he's like the original storyteller, so I'm sure I'm going to get lots of notes for him about the reading. As a reminder, I'm reading this all for the first time when I'm reading with you, so forgive all the mumblings. And thanks to my fam. I'm on my bro here, and my very good friend who jumped in from Chicago. And I hope I can see you all again soon. I miss you all. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Stay safe. And like I said, I'll have some links for other ways that you can stay involved in helping the community. Oh, Grandpa's duly impressed. Nice. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, there's different ways to support the protests happening in the US and how you can help fight for justice in your communities. And I'll put those in the video description. And there's also some in past videos, so check out my channel and the War and Peace playlist, which has all the readings. And there's some notes in the past few videos in the description page, so check that out. Go to 8 Can't Wait and help take a stand to end violence in communities. Thank you all. Mom's marching. Yes, and I know there are people marching tomorrow, so stay safe, stay smart, wear your mask, and because remember, we got all that going on. Love you all. Love you, Rebecca. Love everybody. Have a good weekend. Bye.